Hi, and welcome to Debbie's Rusty Brush. If you've been with me a while, you may have noticed a name change to the channel. That's because I've always had 2 Etsy stores and 2 business Facebook pages. One was the Giddy Hen Country Store, the other was Debbie's Rusty Brush. I've decided to close the Giddy Hen and to move everything over to the brand of Debbie's Rusty Brush. That will allow me to dedicate more time to building my brand and doing the business end of things, which will in turn give me more time to create. After all, that's what I want to do with my time, is create things. So you may notice some changes to the YouTube channel as well. I'm going to still do canvas art, but I'm also going to do different DIYs, upcycling, and painted furniture, just a bunch of different things that fit under Debbie's Rusty Brush brand. So, I hope you enjoy the changes. Today what we're going to do is we're going to upcycle an old cabinet door, and we're going to use DIY paint to do that. And so we'll do a step-by-step on how I went about this. First of all, I took Bondo, and I'm going to fill in the hinge holes and the screw holes from the hinges with the Bondo. Now when you're using Bondo, you have to take the Bondo, squeeze in the hardener. It's supposed to be about 2%, I guess, because there's no way to really measure, and mix it up really good so that you get hardener all the way through the Bondo. That will allow it to set up. Then we're just going to fill the holes, and we're going to fill them a little proud. We want it to be over the holes so that we can sand it back and end up with a flat surface. The reason that I'm doing it this way is because I want to use the back side of the door as my tray. The front side of the door is beveled up, and I like the lip and the look of the lip on the back side of the door. So in order to make it usable and look pretty, we have to fill the holes. So now we've waited for it to harden. These were pretty deep and pretty big, so it took 15 minutes maybe to fully cure all the way through, so it really doesn't take very long. And then you just want to sand it down so that it's nice and smooth. And I did that to both sides, and then I did a real quick sanding on the rest of the door. When using DIY paint, you don't necessarily need to do that. It sticks to pretty much any surface, and this is 100% real wood. But since I had the sander out and I was already creating dust, I decided to go ahead and scuff the entire door front, just to ensure that I had no problems with things sticking the way that I wanted it to. Alright, so then I'm just going to take and coat the entire door with DIY's layered chocolate. And I'm going to do this, add some water, take a paper towel and rub it back, because I want some of the grain to show through. The reason that I'm painting it brown is because when I distress it, sand it back, and wet distress, I want another color other than just that light wood coming through. And so I want to put a basic coat of this brown all the way through, but I want some of the wood grain to come through as well, so that when we distress it, we get multiple colors to work with. It adds more interest. So with DIY paint, if you add water to it, you can thin it down. And part of the reason why I wanted to sand these doors was because I wanted to be able to use the paint a little bit more like a stain. And so that would require using quite a bit of water with it and wiping it back. I'm not too worried about the streaky effect that I'm getting because, as I said, this is just the first layer. Now I'm going to take some Rust-Oleum Clear and I'm going to clear coat it. The reason I'm doing this step is because with DIY paint you can wet distress, and when I put a clear coat on then and let that dry, then when I wet distress it won't go through that clear coat. Now I'm going to just take and randomly apply 3 different colors. This is Firestarter, and it's a bright orange color. And then I'm going to use, I think it's Summer Sunshine. It's their new yellow. And I'm just going to dab it on as well in different areas, mostly around the edge, down in the groove, and up above the groove. I started here on the corners, and then as you will see, I decided to move out and add some more. Alright, so this is their hot pink color. It's called Kissing Booth, and I'm adding some of that in as well. And as you can see, I'm just taking a putty knife and smearing it on, just so that I have some of every kind showing. There's no rhyme nor reason to how I'm doing this or where I'm placing it. It's just what I feel like at the time. Okay, and once again I'm going to clear coat because when I wet distress, I don't want it to go down and take up these colors that I just added. I want these colors to shine through and be part of what is rustic about the tray. So now I'm going to put a couple of coats of Old 57. It's this really pretty turquoise color, and DIY paint is highly pigmented, but I want to make sure that I do have a good coating. So I am going to do one coat, let it fully dry, and then I'll do a second coat, and making sure, and I did this with the brown as well, that I got the edges of the tray so that anything that shows has the colors on there to sand down to and to look pretty. Now the great thing about this is we will finish it with some wax. What I have on hand is Dixie Belle, so that's what we're going to use. But the great thing is anything that goes underneath, I did not tape off the underside of the door, but anything that goes underneath I can just wipe off as long as I don't have wax on it. Now I'm going to take the putty knife, and I've got my hair dryer because I'm creating little chunks of paint that I don't want to stick to the wet paint that is there, and so I'm blowing the chunks of paint away. But what I'm doing is just scraping away some of the Old 57 over the paint that I put on that has the bright colors, because I want those to show through. And the reason that I'm scraping away instead of wet distressing, and I will wet distress and sand here in a little while, but the reason I'm scraping is because I want it to look like it's been dinged up and beaten around, and so I don't want it to be completely smooth. I want it to have some texture, and with the scraping that I'm doing, I'm going to get some of that texture. We'll sand it and it will feel smooth to the touch when we're done, but it will have that look that it has been gouged over time, and that's what we want, is for it to look like it has been worn over time and it's well loved. Okay, so now I've got a sanding block and I'm just going through and sanding because I do want to wear down the edges down to some of that brown. I also want to just smooth out any lumps and bumps that I may have gotten. The one jar of Old 57 that I had was down to the bottom, and with clay paint it will dry out, and so there were a few lumpy areas of the paint, but I like to use all the way to the bottom. And then I scrape the sides of the jar, add water, it will reactivate, but it takes a little bit of work to get it to solidify where there's no lumps or bumps in it. So I'm sanding through the whole thing to bring some of that brown back, some of the bright colors back, and to just give it a distressed look overall. But I also want the finish to be smooth, even though it looks like it's very textured. I'm also wet distressing at the same time as I am using the sanding block. You don't have to do that, but I do like to take the sanding dust up as I go, just so that I can see exactly how much I have brought through, and it cleans up the colors that are underneath as well as I'm going, so I can really get a feel for what exactly I've done, how much I've pulled off, what colors I've got shining through. So I kind of do the wet distress and the sanding in tandem. Alright, and so for this, what we're doing is we're just going to stencil on sunflowers, and I've just got 3 stencil brushes, and I'm making sure to offload. I don't have to be overly particular because I do want this to have that weathered, well-worn look, but I don't want it to bleed through really, really bad. So I am offloading. The yellow, it's going to take me 2 times of going around to get a good coating on the sunflower part, but the brown for the center and the leaves, I only put 1 coat on and it was fine. All of it, there are spots that you can see the teal color coming through underneath, and that just adds to the worn look of it. So I've done the brown, and now I'm just working on the leaves. And like I said, I am not holding the stencil down. I've got it taped on each end, but I'm not holding down the little bits and pieces of where the veins of the leaf go through, because I'm not worried about it bleeding a little bit. I don't want it to completely bleed under, but I'm not worried about getting a little bit of bleeding, so I'm not worried about holding down those pieces and parts. Okay, I want it to dry a little bit more. I do want to add in the other couple of sunflowers, but I don't want to pull up what I've just put down. And so I did that off camera so that the video wasn't all that long. I just placed it to where my flowers wouldn't be overlapping but would all fit on there. Added in some extra stems, some extra leaves. Now what I'm doing is I'm waxing it. I chose to go with the clear wax, excuse me, and I'm just putting on some wax, and then we're going to buff it off. Now typically what you want to do is you want to let it sit for 8, 10, 12 hours, even overnight, and then buff it off. But I wanted to show you how we go about this. If you wait a little longer, you get a little better protection. So after I'm done filming, I will go back and put a second coat on, which you don't typically have to do. And now I'm going to put the handles on. I did pre-drill the holes before, while I was off camera, so that the screws will go in nice and easy, and I don't have to fight with them because it is real wood. And so you may want to drill those pilot holes. It will make it a whole lot easier, but you don't have to. I have used these screws without drilling pilot holes, and they do work, but it is more work. Now, since I did pre-drill, I'm not having to show you the measuring. I did just center the handles vertically and horizontally on the piece of wood that they're sitting on. And the screws were bright new silver, and so I'm just taking some black acrylic and painting those so that they match and that they won't stand out. It'll all just be cohesive. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn off the sound on my phone, so that notification came through. All right, and so that is our finished project. I hope you enjoy.